Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming on this wonderful Friday evening. It's great that you're here at the museum and at our great program that we have for you tonight. This program tonight is already in anticipation. It is in anticipation of a great event that will happen on May 31st, which is when we will celebrate the public opening, and I would say also the long-anticipated reopening of the Michael C. Rockefeller Wing. And that reopening will mark basically a complete reimagination, a transformation, a really multi-year project to reimagine the galleries that we have here at the Met, devoted to the arts of sub-Saharan Africa, ancient Americas, and Oceania. So when these galleries opened in 1982, it was certainly a watershed moment for the museum, for the Met, for our whole collection, for our idea of being a global museum. It was, in fact, a bold and radical expansion of what the Met was showing and what was considered central, of course. And now with this move in '82, really now becoming central for the art history, for art history and its canon. So the presentation back then was certainly very important, but since then we have witnessed a surge of groundbreaking scholarship, of new critical inquiry, of new ideas and more relevant ideas about how this art should be presented, how we better contextualize it, and who we also need to include and invite as being part of the conversation. So that resulted in a long, long period of exchange, of collaboration, of trying to kind of come together with artists, thinkers, cultural stewards, especially from across also the African continent and its diasporas. So these conversations actually informed a new approach, a new idea, an ambitious reinstallation that our curators here at the Met spearheaded in strong collaboration with many others. It was also a reconsideration of why we are doing this and for whom. So this spirit of transformation underpins certainly this current project, a complete conceptual but also physical rethinking of nearly 40,000 square feet of gallery space. We worked closely with Kula Patriantasast and Y Architecture, but it wasn't solely the transformation of architecture. It was about re-entering and recentering the conversation about history, about culture, about voices and narratives that we wanted to bring to the fore. And it was also the outcome, as said, of ongoing partnerships with colleagues and institutions across Africa in this context, and collaborations that led us to the results that you are seeing and that you will hear about. So as we move towards this reopening, I want to basically invite all of you to join us on May 31st or afterwards to celebrate together with us the new Michael C. Rockefeller Wing, and to celebrate also the Met as a place of great presentation, great joy of art, but also of dialogue, of inclusion, of basically also a global exchange of ideas and of knowledge. Tonight's program should be seen in that context. It is a vivid preview to this new chapter here at the Met. Through a remarkable series of short films that were developed by the Met and Susanna Solomon in close partnership with the World's Monument Fund, we explore 12 landmarks, sites across sub-Saharan Africa. Each one of them is a portal, basically, into cultural and architectural and spiritual legacies of the communities that shaped them. And so what we want to do with this program is basically give you a deeper insight into what we are planning, what we have been planning, how you can, what to expect in the Michael C. Rockefeller Wing, but also discuss then some of the outcomes and also our thinking with our partners, and show you, of course, some more footage of the film. So I want to turn things over to Alisa Lagama, the Celia and Michael E. Pulitzer Curator in charge of the Michael C. Rockefeller Wing. It is Alisa's vision, her leadership, and her deep expertise that has informed this entire process. And basically, she devoted not only her entire life for the profound scholarship that she has in this area, but really the last 4 years were marked by thinking solely about the Michael C. Rockefeller Wing. And with that, I want to turn it over to her. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Apart from site-specific commissions by contemporary artists, like this season's Jenny C. Jones Roof Commission, or Wangechi Mutu's memorable 2019 inaugural facade installation, the works of art displayed at the Metropolitan have been transposed from other places and moments in time. The museum environment is one devoted to allowing us contemplative viewing of such flights of human ingenuity. That focus has the potential to reduce the distance between us and their creators and transport us to very different worlds inhabited by their authors. A key question for consideration this evening is, what happens when one's imagination draws a blank in connecting a work of art with even the most basic frame of reference? How might we endeavor to fill in those gaps with context that contributes toward a more rewarding and illuminating connection? The Michael C. Rockefeller Wing galleries we will be inaugurating June 1st pose a special challenge in this regard. The works from sub-Saharan Africa, the ancient Americas, and Oceania presented within its 40,000 square feet encompass vast regions of the world and an especially high concentration of distinct cultures. The 500 creations by artists in Africa alone relate to over 150 cultural traditions. Our project to re-envision the galleries has not been simply an opportunity to raise the bar on their physical presentation. In this new edition, the works selected for inclusion in what is a geographic survey reflect a significant expansion of the repertory of forms and media of visual expression represented. In parallel, the multiple layers of customized content that accompanies them seeks to better equip visitors with a richer and more complex understanding of their significance. This evening's focus is on ways in which we have approached this need here at the Met. Following our screening of a sample of that work, key partners will join me in a discussion. The unparalleled depth and dynamism of cultural developments across Africa from prehistory into the present will be underscored within the entrance to the galleries through a state-of-the-art digital map. New elements of the Africa Gallery didactics are biographies of the authors responsible for the works, as well as histories of relevant regional centers. In-gallery videos of masquerade traditions featured, drawn from archival footage, provide a sense of their dynamic musical, dance, and costume elements. The just completed audio guide expands upon 30 highlights from the perspectives of an interdisciplinary cohort of figures in fields across the humanities. Those voices range from Senegalese musician Baba Mal, Ethiopian-American novelist Maza Mengiste, and Ghanaian sculptor Ellen Atsui. Hundreds of hours were poured into researching, drafting, and editing that content. Somehow, it still didn't seem like enough. My own pursuit of a career as an art historian specializing in African art springs from a love of the extraordinary places works now in our care originated. Oh, sorry. I wanted to somehow introduce a hint of that missing dimension to the museum experience, the sheer diversity and utter originality of Africa's cultural landmarks, from the colossal granite construction of Great Zimbabwe to the palatial reed and thatch structure of Kasubi tombs in Uganda. I wanted a means to usher in awareness of such remarkable built environments that remain relatively unfamiliar, and in doing so, create meaningful bridges between the galleries and the region's notable landmarks. In order to manage the complex logistics of delivering on this concept, we joined forces with the World Monuments Fund. A priority in developing this initiative was for the Met's visitors to hear firsthand from experts on the ground concerning the importance of these remarkable places and the efforts directed toward their preservation. We set as a goal documenting a dozen sites across the subcontinent. Our selection took as its point of departure places aligned with the Met's ongoing research and galleries, and where WMF had existing projects. To achieve a geographic balance, we then expanded beyond these to add major sites of relevance to narratives we wanted to address in Nigeria, Uganda, and Botswana. With this roadmap, the Met hired filmmaker Sosena Solomon. Sosena spent close to 2 years filming on location with Stephen Battle of the World Monuments Fund, me, and our assistant curator, Imani Roach, and working with the Met's digital team to edit a series of short films produced as a layer of our new gallery content. A lecturer in the Fine Arts Department at the University of Pennsylvania's Stuart Weitzman School of Design, recipient of multiple grants and awards, Sosena Solomon worked as a director and cinematographer on many short film projects. Notable among these is Mercato, filmed on location in one of Africa's largest open-air markets and exhibited internationally as an audio, visual, and sensory installation. Each shoot paired Sosena's gifts as a filmmaker with both considerable Met curatorial research and advanced logistics preparation by WMF's Stephen Battle. Essential to the success of these immersive portraits was the generosity of the individuals who shared their deep, multifaceted knowledge with us. The colleagues and associates who did so range from erudite university professors and museum professionals to statesmen like the Katikiro Charles Miyaga, Prime Minister at the court of Buganda, and Kuntai, the San guide to the wondrous paintings in Slodilo Hills, who you will meet momentarily in this evening's screening. That film also features Philip Segadika, a seasoned museum professional leading Botswana's national museums. Last month, he joined the Michael C. Rockefeller Wing team as the recipient of an extended residency for African museum professionals that was built into the Met's capital project. In Botswana, where he currently serves as the head of the Archaeology and Monuments Division, his focus includes the supervision of cultural resource management and collaboration with communities on the development of heritage sites for tourism. In addition, Segadika is furthering ongoing rock art research at Slodilo World Heritage Site. Finally, to broaden the discussion, we will be joined by two gifted journalists, Helene Cooper is national security correspondent for the New York Times. Born in Monrovia, Liberia, her formative years and lifelong ties there are the subject of an eloquent memoir, The House at Sugar Beach, In Search of a Lost African Childhood. Her distinguished career at the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Providence Journal have earned her a Pulitzer Prize and 2 George Polk Awards. Our moderator, Anakwa Dwamena, joins us from Princeton University, where he is currently in the graduate anthropology program. He spent a decade as a journalist working for The New Yorker, New Republic, and The Nation. A Fulbright National Geographic Fellowship subsequently allowed him to pursue research on the intersection of climate change and traditional cultural practices in Ghana. Back when we were filming on location in Liberia and Ghana, I mentioned the film series we were developing to both Helene and Anakwa, and I'm immensely grateful to them both for sharing their keen insights, and to my colleague, Mariana Siciliano in our education department, who was my partner in planning this program. In anticipation of their release on May 28th, this evening we'll screen the film that introduces the series, but that was the final one to be made. Its subject is that of the very origins of art. Impossible to represent in the museum space are the vast landscapes of Southern Africa that served as the very canvas upon which artists began adding their imprint some 75,000 years ago. The expert commentary from both indigenous caretakers and archaeologists makes evident that underlying the surface traces of that ancient tradition's aesthetic beauty are potent symbolic worlds of meaning. This is the case for all the art that followed, featured in the Michael C. Rockefeller Wing. We hope that transporting you to this sublime site instills a sense of wonder, even before stepping into the African art galleries. It is with this context that we invite you on a journey to Slodilo, a key to broadening frames of reference. And now we're going to screen, for the next 15 minutes, the film devoted to this World Heritage Site.
One of the most important finds at Blombos was a piece of ochre. They've basically made the one surface flat by grinding it and then taken a sharp piece of ochre, a crayon in essence, and they've drawn a design in 2 different directions, create an abstract pattern. So it's the first known drawing, dating to 75,000. As we came down to a level which was dated at 100,000 years old. Lying on the surface were 2 of these abalone shells. And this abalone shell was surrounded by ochre, stone for grinding, and seal fat. And what they'd done is they had put together the paint mixture to apply to surfaces like the wall of a cave. The breakthrough about people being able to put designs onto an object like that is that it allows you, for the first time, to store information outside of the human brain. So you are able to store information in an abstract form, but it wasn't abstract to them. Then you can communicate with people without having to talk to them. It's not just simply putting down what you see on the wall of a cave, but rather taking this abstract idea and creating a message that somebody else who comes to the cave after you will be able to look on the walls, but they will understand.
Kuri tsone hela ha o tamo tsone ka pelo e gololosehile o ka ithela gore di na le matha ha o ta ka pelo ya gago o nyatsisa gore taba tse ba di bua ba ipuela le di sele.
Tsodilo is the highest area in Botswana. The area around Tsodilo is generally a flat area. So you see this protrusion over the landscape that is very mind-blowing. I mean, it's like, wow, it's the place you want to get to.
The name itself actually means the hills of the gods or the place of the gods. And there's a waterhole. I think it's the only maybe for miles around. And when you use the water from that place, you have to respect the spirit that makes that water perennial. And so it was a very, very important focal point from people that lived for millennia in those environments.
Tsodilo is, of course, currently a World Heritage Site for three main reasons. Firstly, the archaeology of the area. Tsodilo has a continuous occupation for up to about 100,000 years. And secondly, the relationship of the people with the landscape. The third reason, and very important one, is the appreciation of the human creative genius that is involved in the rock art. There are at least 4,500 individual paintings at about 400 panels across the landscape. This is all within a 10 square kilometer area.
They were not actually, done as a single event. If you look at the patination processes, there's some that are much older because of heavy patination, and then some are much fresher looking. Looking across Southern Africa, there are certain aspects of the rock art that seem to be widespread across the region, but there are certain things that are specific to those particular regions. Certainly, from the manners of depiction, so the ways that people painted these subjects, the symbolism behind rock art is a very important thing to think about. If you go deeper, analyzing all these different minutiae in the art, then you start to realize that there's more to it than just aesthetics.
The spirit world is represented, certainly, in the pictures. The therianthropes, as we call them, half animal, half human, a man with hoofs, for example, or an antelope head. And then there are the transformed figures. This is a baboon shape that's got horns, and he's carrying a quiver. There's this constant interweaving of images. So it's really the whole overall message of interwoven associations and meanings that must have struck them. That rock face was probably itself a membrane between this world and the spirit world that lies behind it. These were not just trivial pictures of daily life. These were exceedingly powerful, meaningful pictures.
Ekola pya ke gola batsadi ba me ona ba ntse ke le lebala ke le moshimanyana ke kgatela ntse ke di bona ya no ke botsa ntse ba re nyado tse ke diphologolo ke diphologolo ba shimola ntse ba ke re pele ne re itsamelela re le bana re shana mo tsone ke thopela ka re ke tironyane ya go twi ke a re hira ke re kore ke lehelo ra rona.
When you get to the Tsodilo Hills, there's a whole lot that is invisible that belongs to this category that people call intangible heritage, where people just walk in there, they haven't seen anything. They say, you know, I feel something here. And I can't describe it, and it's probably the only thing that I can think of is spiritual.
Dancing among the San community, it comes in many ways. The rhythm and the stamping of the feet is definitely something beyond just the singing. There's a message there as well. People are entreating the ancestors for intervention in a situation. Often it's around that time that then one of them might go into a trance or into an ultra-body experience of some kind, the stiffening of the body and all that.
In an altered state of consciousness, images are projected onto surfaces like a slideshow.
They might then feel the power enough to lay hands on the rock.
And lo and behold, they discovered painting. So art then took its origin in a religious experience of projection of images. And that's my view of how people came to make images in the first place. One of the postures that is depicted in the rock art is what we call bending forward and arms back. Very awkward posture, not the sort of posture that could happen by accident and then get depicted. And it is found all over Southern Africa. Here, you can see people dancing with their arms in the backward posture. And it puzzled us for many years. What could it mean? It must mean something. I was in the Kalahari and we spoke about the dance, and one of the men stood up and put his arms in this position and bent forward, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and he explained that people do that when they're asking God to give them more potency, and God puts the potency into their spine, and it boils up the spine until it explodes in the head and takes them to the spirit world. This magnificent spirit being, instead of arms back, has transformed arms in these feathery lines from the top of its head, and it's connected to the heart beast, which is probably the source of the potency that the medicine man is using to transform himself into a spirit world being. And here it is for our contemplation. We see what they saw in the spirit world.
Ya no mo botshelo jwa me o thaba tsone tsa rona tse mo gompieno kore di mo moe wa me kore ke beile thata mo tumelo ke beile thata mo dithabeng.
local people have lived here for thousands of years, but they have respected these paintings as the relics of their ancestors. But we know that these paintings are not going to remain forever. One day, they will definitely not be there. The panel here is a good example of the different conservation problems we have here at Tsodilo. As you can see here, the minerals that coming from the water, from the rocks that are destroying this. And if you look carefully here, there is a painting which is now almost all gone. Like this panel is on the sunlight, but also there will be sand abrasion that makes it to be fainted like that. And this oryx here has something that is typical of some spots within Tsodilo, where there's been some kind of exfoliation. And we have been thinking that there have been talk about some people from the community believing that they want to make the animal alive. And so they will be, hitting on it to get it alive in their prayers. So we want to see if that is still practiced now, so that we see how to manage it, whether there are other ways that they can still get the same meaning without destroying the rock paintings. Yeah. My thinking and my vision for Tsodilo, both personally but also as part of my job, really is in the integrated management plan for Tsodilo. The future where this area will be fully managed by an empowered community, with government only as a facilitator. The principle for this is obvious, that the local people have to have a relationship with the landscape, with the resources, cultural heritage resources. They have to have meaning on it, because that will be the true ownership and empowerment.
I think it's true to say that rock art deserves a central place in human heritage. It goes back longer than any other art form, and Saharan rock art, of all the rock arts in the world, is the finest. Some of the images are no bigger than half of your thumb, with details in them. And this is miraculous, that all those years ago they could do that. And to ignore it would be to ignore our human heritage.
Please join me in welcoming to the stage Susana Solomon, Philip Segadika, Anak Dwena, and Helene Cooper.
Thank you. I guess we can, following up on this gorgeous film we just saw, put Philip on the spot and ask to hear a little bit about Tsodilo. I was really struck by the intersection between the works as artworks and the spiritual aspects, and I was wondering if you can speak a bit about that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's no doubt, there's no doubt about it that there's a lot of ethnological studies, anthropological, and that have shown the relationship between the meanings, that is what we find on the paintings, and the people's belief systems. But also, at least at Tsodilo and some parts of Southern Africa, we are very much blessed because we have also their communities that, if you like, continue some of the practices that we also find on the rock art. which doesn't happen in other parts of the world. So I think that is definitely one of the exciting things about this part of the world. Yeah.
I'm curious, I guess, for Lisa, for you, how did this project come together in the first place? And Susanna as the filmmaker.
Well, first let me say it took us a long time to get the shots of the elephants. I just want to thank you, Elisa, and everyone that, from the production standpoint, and Philip, who was just an incredible resource and facilitator. And so I love this, and I'm very pleased. But in terms of how the project got started, Elisa and the curatorial staff here at the Met reached out and invited me to apply as a filmmaker, as they were looking for a voice to, a documentary filmmaker to have a voice behind this series. And so we went to Great Zimbabwe, which was our inaugural pilot. And I don't think they knew exactly how this was going to take shape. But when we came back with all this gorgeous footage, I think it kind of, it expanded from there. I don't know, Lisa, if you want to talk more about it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thinking behind developing something like this, for me, started incubating when I worked on an exhibition that opened in 2020 called Sahel, Art and Empire on the Shores of the Sahara. And I was trying to bring to life this incredibly important, culturally important region of West Africa, and creating context for treasures that museums in the region lent to us for this very special presentation. And one of the features of the exhibition that just completely captivated and brought the subject to life for visitors was a wonderful film created by the art historian Susan Vogel of the resurfacing of the Great Mosque at Djenné. And I mean, the beauty of that imagery and the dynamism of the contemporary lived reality and how it was congruent with the historical works that people were viewing in the space. People were just so moved by that experience. And we were developing the plan for the galleries and permanent galleries in parallel. And I thought, I want to infuse this experience of our permanent collection with more of this, because these are living traditions, and I wanted our visitors to experience the immediacy of what's unfolding on the ground. And so I had the good fortune that Bénédicte de Montleur, director of World Monuments Fund, visited the exhibition. We started a conversation, and we had all these months of sitting on Zoom calls to think through what kind of form this idea might take. And we were so incredibly lucky that Susanna was up for the challenge of developing this with us.
It's always a treat and really a breath of fresh air to get to engage with Africa and African artwork, African expression in context, not mediated by some of the things that we always have to go through to get to it. So I'm jealous that you got to travel to these 12 sites and get to see these things firsthand. I'm very eager to hear, what was surprising for you, for three of you being involved? What were some things that were memorable? Yeah.
Gosh, there's so much. I mean, like Elisa mentioned earlier, I mean, this is... Yes. Can you hear me? Okay. It was a whirlwind. I mean, doing 12 countries in a year and a half. I mean, we were there from around 7 days in each site. So there was really no moment to breathe and really take it in. But I think what, was surprising is just how, rich and diverse some of these sites. I wasn't really familiar with some of the architectural sites like Great Zimbabwe. I've never heard of the Colonial Tower before this, and so Conical Tower, sorry. And so I think it was just the element of just the richness and the diversity of architecture, but also just some of the personal narratives that we were able to carve out in such a short amount of time, I think, was really special to me, yeah.
You can't really ask me about what surprised me about my own space. But I should say that it was great to host people from the Met. And because we know that most of your audience are art lovers. And Tsodilo is a great example where you get to see art. I mean, the symbolic component is there, no doubt about it. And the belief systems of the people. But there's also the artistic that you see. I mean, some of the art is, a whole lot of the other art, the art is displayed on panels that are high and at a distance, that you are supposed to gaze at and look at and appreciate, get a statement, a message about the producers, but also probably for those people. Of course, for the contemporaries of the people that made the art, it's about the message to their peers. But for us, it's also heritage. And so there's all these issues at play there. But also, of course, because of the audience that most of the Met people have, it also became some kind of cross-pollination. Because, I mean, the artwork, when you look at the rock art, you are seeing the techniques, the canvas, as it were, the rock on which it was made. The tensions also that are on the rock art, I mean, the rivalries coming from the superimposition of the one rock art over the another, the aging, and there's a lot of things that, as an art lover, you will really get to enjoy being at Tsodilo. So you're all welcome.
I have one more thing to add. Yeah, the physicality of this project. I mean, I've been traveling and filming in East Africa for many years, but I didn't expect to climb 8,000 feet up Abune Mata in Tigray, and so that just to get the shot, yeah, we weren't really expecting to do that, and so I think that really came as a surprise, and we, again, something that we had to do to get to our character, and yeah, that the rope really, it's all a facade. I mean, I don't think it really, so.
Wait, you climbed, the rope didn't help you? You just climbed up there yourself?
Stephen Battle at the end told me, that it doesn't really protect you, and so that was a little bit of a surprise. But it was worth it. It changed my life. And just to know this is what, everyday people, this is how they climb to get to their place of worship. So that was incredibly touching. Beyond. But surprising, Elisa, you didn't tell me I was going to be doing this.
Can I just ask you something? Because this is like, this blows my mind. So I have to put in my 2 cents. I was in Tigray more than a decade ago, and I remember landing in Mekelle. I was there for a story, and saying to my fixer, I really want to go see those cool churches built into the cliffs. Can we stop by? And he just looked at me like, how much time do you have? Because I literally thought that you could just drive by and that, we'd be driving to Koraro in Ethiopia, and we'd eventually, you could drive by these churches. Can you tell us a little bit about just
2.5
how
hours,
far it is from anything?
2.5 hours climbing up and down. And so imagine, and then how just intense, and then we have to film. And with the equipment, yeah. I mean, we had help with the equipment, but still, it was very, beyond.
Did you
where
go
it's,
all the way up each day and then come back down?
No, but so we went to several different rock-hewn churches, and they were all a climb, but that was the steepest. It's typically about a 45-minute climb for the average rock-hewn church. That was just the steepest one, so.
But I bet it felt worth it to get these images.
To get to these interiors, yeah.
So
I want to hear more about this.
you want to hear more about Well, I wanted to ask you, Helene, Liberia is one of those odd places on the continent that seems to struggle with its identity. And we're going to see a small clip on Providence Island, which is one of the sites included, one of the films. And so I wanted to ask about why Providence Island is a living monument to Africa and African history, and what is the tension that is referred to here. So we'll take a look at this for a second.
My paternal grandparents came from the United States. So I come from that blend, that fertilization between indigenous and settler. And it's not unique. There are many Liberians who are also from that because of intermarriage and liaison between the two groups. That liaison is important because contrary to what some tend to suggest, that there was this gulf between both groups, even though politically and socially, the descendants of the settlers dominated until 1980. When a coup occurred, there was always interrelationships between both groups.
Providence Island is where in 1822 the first ship of freed slaves from New York landed in Liberia. And my great-great-great-great-grandfather, Elijah Johnson, was on that ship. And they were coming to Africa. These were all freed slaves, and they wanted to rule themselves. They were running away from an antebellum way of life in the United States, and they wanted to rule themselves and have their own country. And the ship on the way over was, sort of a harbinger of the troubles that were to come. I remember when I found my great-great-great-great-grandfather's diary that he wrote on the ship on the way over. There's a passage in there that stuck in my mind where he said that John Fisher beat his wife while we were on deck this morning. I think this is a very dull lamp that I'm taking with me to a dark land, but I have faith in my God. And that passage just really struck me because I was like, wow, that it says so much about everything after that would sort of divide Liberia and be at the root of all of the problems that Liberia would have, because you had these Christianized now, they'd been freed, they'd been slaves in the US, and they had become Christian, and they were coming to what they now believe is a dark continent, and they think they're bringing the message of God to convert the heathens. And when they arrived on Providence Island, which is surrounded by Montserrat Bay in what would become Monrovia, they thought they were coming there to bring the word of God, to heathen Africans who were still engaging in the slave trade at the time. And so you had all this tension immediately built in there, and the two sides, I won't go on too long, but they ended up, the American Colonization Society, which ran this whole operation as part of this Back to Africa movement, ended up sending these agents to purchase, for what turned out to be $300, this area of land that would become Liberia. They purchased it from the indigenous African king, King Peter, at gunpoint. They had pistols cocked to his head and basically said, you're gonna give us this land. And the Africans that were already there sort of thought that these settlers would assimilate into their way, into the natural tribal structure, whereas these settlers thought they were coming to convert, they were coming as not missionaries, but they were gonna, they would bring civilization, as it were, to Liberia, and that just sort of formed the kind of the split that you saw in the society that would go on to last for 150, 175 years and end up leading to a civil war that was devastating. But when I was growing up in Liberia, on our way to my grandmother's house, we'd drive over Providence Island on the bridge that goes across every Sunday, going from church to my grandma's house. And I never even thought about, wow, this is the spot where they first landed, because it was just part of the natural, the natural landscape. And the idea that the World Monuments Fund and the Met is actually looking into taking what is this island that is pretty much untouched and sort of bringing to light the huge cultural significance that it has in Liberia is such a huge deal. It's why I wanted to be part of this immediately as soon as Alyssa, with my non-art self.
Well, Liberian art has a very important presence in the galleries, and it really is a history that most Americans do not realize how intertwined our pasts are, and it really is a story that we wanted to foreground in terms of how connected we are in a relatively recent part of our shared heritage. And so I have to say, Providence Island, it was probably the most unphotogenic of all of the places we went, but Susana managed to capture the magic that you were alluding to, Helene, that something very, very momentous happened there.
I would agree. I mean, I don't think we knew what we were walking into with that. We had this understanding of this rich history that you so beautifully shared, but literally, I mean, there were bats and trees, and so
There's garbage all around the island.
But that became the part of the story, and I think filming it in a way, and we'll talk a bit more about that, I really wanted the audience to see the beauty in these places, and that like behind the gaze, and how you just being so delicate with understanding, like I didn't want it to look dirty, and so I think we managed to do that, but it was hard because there weren't any people. It wasn't beautiful as the Ashanti shrines or anything that was so artful, but there was an energy in the place, and it was like you could feel the history. And so sometimes filming a space as a character in the absence of people, I think, is something pretty special. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how do you capture that when this is a place with so much tension and so much contested history? How do you get the artistic or aesthetic elements in a way that they're able to stand on their own?
Well, we had pretty powerful interviews, and I think that was kind of the precipice or the inspiration behind, how to film just an empty space. How do you even just categorize it in ways visually through composition and just allow it to be empty, and we went into the outskirts, into the towns, and we followed people on motorcycles, because that was just definitely a perspective that was surrounding the island. And so how does the trash affect those communities? So it's just a silent visual connection as opposed to it being very literal. And we also filmed the bats, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that I really enjoyed and learned enormously from in terms of the interviews that we conducted was the interdisciplinary nature of the perspectives that we documented. Professor Allen, who's on the screen, is a historian at this site. We also interviewed a young archaeologist who was digging and uncovering the physical evidence of what the narrative that you were telling, Helene. And Sosena filmed a dance troupe at this site that was so beleaguered in many ways, and yet this youthful energy that she captured and the beauty of their performance. So for each one of these places, we were able to pull together a portrait of a place, coming at it from a lot of different angles. And I mean, I think from the museum's point of view, we wanted you to hear unmediated directly from people on the ground about things that they care about, things that they prioritize, so that your engagement with heritage from this part of the world is not simply an academic one, but is also about the contemporary relevance of the history that we're telling.
That's what was so cool about these films. I wish the audio had worked, because, and it did with most of the Botswana film, but to hear these African voices actually telling our stories was really, really nice. And that is sort of a thread that you see throughout all of these films. Especially, it was cool to watch the Botswana one, but the first one I watched was a gallery cut of Phillips, and that had no sound at all when I looked at it, and I was so moved by that, and I kept struggling with this one big question that I'm dying to ask you, Philip, which is, how did they get all the way up to the top of that cliff to paint these paintings? Because it's like sheer rock wall, and these are way up high. I mean, did they have ladders 75,000 years ago?
And we couldn't find a lot of them. Part of, you could speak to
My
that.
paternal
Yeah. Yeah. No, well, there's, I mean, again, I'm sure a ladder is the easiest thing to do anyway. I mean, if you look at one of the films, for instance, on in Uganda, the Kasubi tombs, and how they go up the massive, thatch infrastructure, you'll be able to see that it must be very easy, easy, as much as possible. Yeah. But I think definitely what is important was people went out of their way to put this art where they wanted to have it, to be looked at by people and to be appreciated and to last long, because the ingredients and the concoction, varied as it is, it was really meant to last long. As this has come, we know, for instance, in Namibia, where at Apollo 11 cave, where a rock painting was found in archaeological context that goes back to 27,000 years back. So you can see that this is ancient of days, and the painting has survived in that sense.
You've anticipated my next question, which was going to be that we can't think about art without thinking about the people involved, and so I'm curious, at least with you working with people in the community, Susanna, in the act of filming this and making this, what kind of interactions, conversations, things that stuck or stick with you as you think about these works of art?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great pleasure. In each one of these sites, we hired local drone operators and storytellers and filmmakers to assist. And so it was really amazing to exchange information, knowledge, but most of them are not trained in film. And so, but technically, YouTube is kind of their reference point. So it's just amazing to, very valuable to work with local filmmakers. And I think that, and so that was a huge exchange for me.
And I think at least 4, perhaps more, of the films there are World Heritage sites that are also listed on what World Heritage calls criteria 6, which is basically about the relationship of the people with the landscape, the belief systems. Tsodilo, Great Zimbabwe, Osuno Shobo, and of course the Kasubi tombs in Uganda. And all of them, even at the World Heritage level, they recognize the importance of the communities that have kept these traditions over years and years. And by some coincidence or design, you guys decided to go to those key sites. And I think this is a very fair celebration of the people's commitment to their belief systems and how they have kept this. I mean, for instance, Tsodilo, when it was listed in 2001, one of the things that surprised the ICOMOS, the International Council of Museums team, was the almost impeccable presentation. Very little, if any, graffiti. When people have lived literally with these paintings for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so this is because the people knew that this is not just something to deface. It was part of there are stories about the crevices, the rock paintings, the rock shelters, the caves, the trees, the soil, and people believe so many intangible cultural heritage stories attached to this part of the landscape. So the belief system is definitely a strong part of a people's belief, and this has protected both the landscape and also, of course, the cultural elements of their own ancestors. As they say, this is the sweat of our fathers. So that is it.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, one of my favorite, or my favorite film is one I think you filmed on the border of Togo and Benin, and it's of these mud earthen houses that in Ghana are seen as a sign of the past, seen as it's people in the rural areas who live in these types of houses, and yet in this film that we saw, these homes were seen as works of art, were seen as homes, were seen as spiritual places, and they required the community to come together to put them together. And it really taught us a lot about the spiritual life of that community. And there was just this very strong connection to, and you've mentioned this, the sense of ancestors, ancestral heritage, and also a very pure valoration of nature, of that relationship. And I wonder if you experienced that in some of the other sites as well.
Absolutely. What comes to mind in Uganda when we were filming, the king's wife, who we wanted to film her connect to her husband, who is an ancestor. And so by the fire, she lit the fire, and then she started to burp. And, I didn't expect that, and I didn't know that that was her way of communicating, to call him to come into communication, just to watch that unfold on camera, and for her to give us that access, it's a very sacred moment. So that was really, and I've never, didn't expect that. When we think about prayer and we think about communicating to spirit through song and through more traditional ways, I thought that was just such a beautiful, tender moment that she brought me into. So.
But wait, I don't understand. Was she at the cultural site?
Yeah. So right in front of the tomb, she lit a fire and she started to call him in.
Yes.
Wait, I don't get it though. She just went.
Can we get to the next slide, please?
She just went there, or she lived there?
So she lives on the site, and she's
next slide,
married to
please.
him.
And she's what?
She's married to him, the spirit.
She's married to the spirit and lives at the site.
Correct.
That is wild.
Yeah, I think it's a little further down. This is not working.
Well, once a king never really dies. He has a commemorative marker, but then he is embodied forever through people who are related to him, and these wives, carry the essence of him in them.
But if you ask her, she really embodies his presence, and she, is his wife and is very committed to him as if he's here with us. And I just thought that was really remarkable.
I mean, I think ultimately the takeaway is that none of the places where we filmed are museums. They're living sites that have many, many layers of history to them, but they continue to be activated by people in the present moment.
And that brings a lot of challenges for us who are employed, as it were, to take care of these heritage sites, which are not just monuments, but also living spaces, living cultural heritage. And so you bring in your scientific conservation ideas. At the same time, you take off your shoes because that's holy ground. And so you respect the way that the people will want it to be presented, and even their viewpoints. And one key issue, at least for some parts of Africa, is that we also are concerned that these places should not just continue to have spiritual meaning, but also should also be places of livelihood, because there is also poverty and other issues that need to be taken care of. That is why we also at the same time work to ensure that we facilitate for people to be able to to earn a living from taking care of those heritage sites as well, as tour guides, and also to try to learn what the people from New York need, so that when you come to Tsodilo, we know what to tell you.
So Helene, this is on the screen is the earthen building we were talking about. But Philip, you bring something up, which is, I think, in a lot of the films. I'm thinking of the Oshun Oshobo one in particular. There are people who work on these, like you, who work on these heritage sites, and the knowledge of how to preserve them in a very specific way has to be passed down, right? So I think we have to think of that knowledge itself as part of the heritage that also needs to be preserved.
Yeah, and I think this is very. When you look at the films, this will be one of the common threads. I mean, in Zimbabwe, in Botswana, and other places, Oshun Oshobo, as you say, repeatedly people bring up this issue of how they learned the skills of conserving those sites from their fathers or uncles, and then they also are bringing in their children to pass this on to the next generations. And so this is not surprising that this has stayed this long. And so that is why those who are managing should also learn to take a step back and give those local communities the voice and the decision-making process so that this is continued in the traditions. Yeah.
I mean, I would say that, one of the things that is remarkable about a person like Kuntai, who you encounter in the film, is that, Philip has been training many young staff members to follow in his footsteps, but he's the only person who knows where every single one of the major paintings are in that landscape. You don't have him leading you. You only see a handful of paintings, and it's, that's something that is, needs to be communicated and relayed.
That's true, and that's very important because, you see, for people like Kuntai and others ahead of him, the relationship with the hills was spiritual, personal. It made sense to them. But their children and grandchildren may not necessarily have the same spiritual affinity with the landscape as he had. And so we need to strengthen other ways that they find meaning on the landscape. That is why then these young guides who are going there, partly to earn a salary or some wages, but they continue then to learn from him as he goes through the other crevices and other parts of the landscape, because definitely meanings will change over time because of many reasons. That will be on the...
How long does it take when you're going through Tsodilo to see all of the paintings? Is this like a major day long? Is it week long? I mean, how many paintings are we talking about?
Tsodilo is like the Met. Oh no, the Met is like Tsodilo. You can keep on going there so many times and experience it differently at different times. But you can't finish it in a week. I mean, you can rush it, and then say, I've done it in 3 days. But really, you just want to keep on going back because you think about something else, because the stories are different. It's not only different panels. The stories are also connected across panels, or sometimes one panel might have an entire narrative. So it's, in terms of how much time, it really depends. I mean, we have people who are coming there for 2 hours rushed, and they come in and they go. Others come there for 3 days of pilgrimage, and they live there. They want to drink those spiritual waters and touch the soil and rub themselves with the ashes from Tsodilo. All types of healings that are taking place on the landscape.
You know we're all going to go now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to add, and the significance of this series too, it's a cultural record, it's an act of preservation as well. And so a lot of these histories are also captured for that very reason. I mean, in Tigray, there's ongoing civil war that's affecting a lot of those churches and, the cultural relics inside them. And so telling these stories are really important, filming these stories are really important. And so, yeah, I'm very honored to be part of that as well on this.
Well, on that note, are there any segments, any incidences, any things that didn't make it into the films that you want to touch on?
Where's
in,
my editor? We're
few
editors
minutes?
here. There are lots of hours of footage. And, we filmed as many people as we could in the time constraints that we had. And there's a lot of elders and chiefs. Each film has a very specific arc, and so we found that we had to eliminate a lot of interviews that didn't speak to the storyline. And so there's lots of interviews, unfortunately, and perspectives. I think on average we would film maybe 7 interviews, and we would use 4, for instance. So we didn't want it to be a talking head. We wanted to include experiences, cultural dancing and other, beyond just the framework of each film. So there's a lot of interviews, unfortunately, that didn't make the edit.
But will be part of our archive that will be things that we will make sure that people have access to in the long term.
We're almost at time, but I wanted to ask if, thinking about the different sites and the different films, if there's any larger observation, something that stuck with you, whether in the making of it, in the editing, in the conceptualizing, that you would like to share with us. Basically, any last thoughts? Yeah.
The incredible diversity that we need to get beyond the homogenization of thinking about Africa, and really need to celebrate its rich diversity.
And to take the time to aesthetically, cinematically show these sites with beauty and honor. It's really important.
Yeah. And from a heritage management perspective, we are thinking more like we want to open up the stories to the global audience, but also for partnerships as well. Because, conservation of rock paintings and of other types of heritage there might do with a bit of international collaboration that we want to be able to, and also to share the stories, of course. Yeah. The stories that are often, the reason why we rushed into this project without reservation is because it's one of those, the projects that we know are bringing the other aspect that is not often celebrated about our part of the world.
Okay. Well, wonderful. So I think for me, the message from seeing the films from today's discussion is that the ancestors might be past, but they're still reaching out to us to connect to us, and we have to, whether it involves actually going to Tsodilo like Elaine is taking us all to, or it's, you know, coming to the opening at the end of the month, seeing the films, and also engaging with African work, African art, African culture, wherever you encounter it in a meaningful way. So thank you, everyone, and thank you all for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it.